After the events of Moon, the Earth is destroyed and most of the human population dead. Zombies run rampant through the smouldering ruins of the globe, but the storyline of Black Ops 2 Zombies actually starts a little before the 3 nuclear missiles hit Earth. In the remote Nevada desert, a top-secret US nuclear testing site falls victim to a zombie outbreak. A scientist working at the site, Marlton Johnston, is able to make his way back into a small nuclear bunker and lock himself inside to seek refuge from the outbreak. A short time later, a 4-man CIA or CDC team, depending on what faction you play as in Nuketown, are sent in to clear out the zombies and secure the site. This is where the game starts on Nuketown. During the battle, an AI-controlled bus pulls up at Nuketown, honking its horn in the process. Marlton, seeing the bus as an opportunity to escape the zombie-ridden test site, quickly makes his way out of the bunker and boards the bus, leaving Nuketown for the 4 players to battle. Now, I know this may sound a little confusing considering we can't actually see Marlton leaving the bunker and boarding the bus, but it's the only way I can explain Marlton being in the bunker and the TranZit bus honking its horn in Nuketown. But anyway, back to the 4 players still fighting against the waves of undead on Nuketown. They soon come across a small TV in one of the houses, which is somehow connected to Griffin's station and thus allows the operatives to listen in on Richtofen as he completes the final steps of his master plan. Upon round 25 in Nuketown, Richtofen swaps souls with Samantha and thus takes control of the ether and its powers, giving him full control over the zombies. In Nuketown, the zombie eyes turn blue and Richtofen becomes the new voiceover for power-ups from round 25 onwards to let us know that he has now completed his master plan. Not long afterwards, the game ends on Nuketown as the 4 government operatives are killed by the zombies. During the closing sequence, we witness one of the nuclear missiles that Dr. Maxis launched blast down towards Nuketown, completely obliterating the site and much of the northwestern hemisphere. Upon launch of the nuclear missiles, Maxis immediately realizes that his calculations were erroneous and thus now threatens the entire existence of the human race. Maxis originally only planned to destroy the Earth's ozone layer to sever Richtofen's ties with the Earth from the ether. However, realizing it is now too late for his plan A, Maxis reverts to his plan B, which involves contacting the remaining human communities and instructing them to activate 3 polarization devices located around the ruins of the globe in order to open a gateway to the ether so that he can defeat Richtofen once and for all, whilst using the ether's powers to heal the Earth in the process. Meanwhile, Richtofen realizes that the missiles have severely damaged his control over the undead, and so decides to embark upon a similar task to Maxis, in the sense that he needs human survivors to activate the 3 polarization devices so that Richtofen can strengthen his connections to the Earth from the ether, and thus strengthen his control over the zombies. Meanwhile on Earth, the apocalypse begins to take shape. With billions of people already killed by the nuclear missiles, law and order amongst the remaining survivors collapses whilst the global zombie pandemic begins to take place. Both Richtofen and Maxis begin their quests of persuading survivors to activate the polarization devices for them. However, both Richtofen and Maxis have their limitations. Maxis can only talk to survivors through electronic equipment with no active nearby power grid to disrupt the signal. Richtofen can only contact survivors telepathically who have come into direct contact with element 115, or in other words, come into physical contact with a zombie. Due to the nature of the situation, most survivors had chosen to side with either Richtofen or Maxis. Those who hadn't chosen a side yet were aggressively pestered by both Richtofen and Maxis until they finally gave in and picked a side. This caused a huge division between the remaining human survivors, with Richtofen supporters in particular being lured into attacking fellow survivors who had sided with Maxis. Ultimately, Richtofen did seem to have the upper hand in this battle, because the telepathy he gains from the ether could drive his supporters insane, just as Samantha did to Richtofen himself, as well as to Yuri Savoyski and Dr. Maxis amongst others. This enabled Richtofen to manipulate his supporters into attacking Maxis supporters. Richtofen also had the advantage of being in control over the zombies, albeit an unstable control, but nevertheless it allowed him to utilise them against Maxis. In particular, Richtofen used the Avogadro, who is the electrical zombie boss from TranZit, to kill Dr. Maxis supporters. Overall, both Richtofen and Maxis created a war between human survivors, with survivors losing trust, becoming suspicious, and even killing each other due to the side they had chosen. But now let's backtrace a few steps to pick up the story of our 4 new main characters. After Marlton left Nuketown with the bus, he soon arrives in the TranZit County, where the bus becomes stuck in a loop of the same 5 stops of the TranZit map. He then meets Abigail Misty Bryton, who jumps on the bus with him. When Marlton and Misty arrive at the town, they find Russman and Samuel J. Stuhlinger, who join Misty and Marlton on the bus to create our new zombie slaying unit. However, unbeknownst to Marlton, Misty and Russman, Stuhlinger had previously eaten zombie flesh, so he was receiving telepathic messages from Richtofen ordering him to activate the nearby polarization device in the TranZit County. As the four arrive at the bus depot, the game starts on TranZit and now we take control of the characters. Shortly after, we receive our first message from Maxis asking us to assist him. So this is where we must decide to follow either Richtofen or Dr. Maxis. In Black Ops 2 Zombies, the maps TranZit, Rise and Buried have two-sided Easter eggs. This means that there are two separate paths you can take in order to complete the Easter egg and get the achievement. One side for Richtofen and one side for Maxis. Soon, the four characters discover a pylon in the middle of a cornfield. This tower is the first polarization device that Richtofen and Maxis are fighting for control over. If you choose to complete Richtofen's side, the tower will have blue/purple lights illuminating it. If you choose to complete Maxis' side, the tower will be illuminated by red, orange and yellow lights. These lights show us who is in control of the polarization device. And that's pretty much the storyline for TranZit. Once the tower's been activated, the characters fight the zombies until the game ends. But before we move on to Rise, there's still a few more things I want to clear up in TranZit. First up is the buses. Now, as you ride the bus around TranZit, you may hear the driver mention some secret government bases and other landmarks that aren't actually on the map, such as Area 51, the Harp Research Station, Bohemian Grove, as well as other such places. The reason why he calls out the names of these places is because I think these were the original stops on his bus route before the apocalypse. It was likely that his original bus route was created to transport government personnel to these secret facilities, but obviously once the missiles hit Earth, GPS systems went down, roads became blocked, etc., meaning the driver could not take people to the intended stops. Instead, he is now stuck on the same loop of the 5 TranZit bus stops, but still incorrectly calls up the names of his original bus stops as though he is still driving on his original route, since he is a robot so he doesn't know any better. The second thing I want to discuss in TranZit is the Storm and the Avogadro. Now, the Avogadro is originally being stored in a test chamber within the power station. It's not exactly clear why he's there in the first place, but it's most likely because of a top secret US government project that the Avogadro was created, possibly to use as a weapon against America's enemies. Either way, when the zombie apocalypse occurs, Richtofen gains control of the Avogadro since it is linked with Element 115. Then, after the power is turned on, the Avogadro is released from the test chamber and into the atmosphere. This is also where we witness the storm for the first time. This is because the Avogadro is inside the storm, and if you kill the final zombie of the rounds whilst the storm is overhead, the Avogadro will descend from the storm and attempt to kill you. And that's pretty much it for TranZit. After the four activate the tower in favour of Richtofen or Maxis, Richtofen teleports them to the top of a huge skyscraper in the crumbling abandoned city of Shanghai in China. With the first polarization device in TranZit now active, both Richtofen and Maxis regain contact with Stuhlinger and friends and attempt to persuade them to activate the second polarization spire located atop the skyscraper. The four also discover some radio transmissions sent across the globe by other survivors. Some are by survivors deluded by the tasks they are following from either Richtofen or Maxis. Others are from survivors who have been abandoned by Richtofen and Maxis and desperately need help. Through the series of radio transmissions, we learned that, before the CDC was overrun, they managed to uncover alarming evidence that the air itself was now becoming contaminated with Element 115, meaning everyone was now potentially exposed to Richtofen's telepathy, regardless of whether or not they had come into physical contact with a zombie. We also learned that a squadron of fighter jets was dispatched to destroy the remains of the CDC after it was overrun, in order to prevent any secrets or sensitive materials from getting out. Nevertheless, Stuhlinger, Russman, Misty and Marlton begin to activate the tower on top of the skyscraper for the side that they have picked. With Richtofen becoming increasingly concerned that the four aren't following his orders, he threatens Stuhlinger by warning him that he will tell Misty, Marlton and Russman that Stuhlinger had previously eaten zombie flesh and thus is infected if he doesn't follow Richtofen's orders, knowing that the other three will surely kill Stuhlinger if they find out that he is infected. After a long while of battling the undead, Marlton, Misty, Russman and Stuhlinger are eventually able to activate the polarization device in Shanghai, leaving just one more remaining. This is where the game ends on Rise.
When they found them, had their arms wrapped around each other, the tint of poison laying near by their clothes. The day they both mistook an earthquake for the fallout, just another when the wild wind blows.
Before we witness the final showdown between Richtofen and Maxis in Buried, we first need to travel almost a century back in time to Prohibition-era America in the early 1930s. Four notorious gangsters, Albert Weasel Arlington, Salvatore DeLuca, Billy Handsome and Michael Finn O'Leary, had recently been sentenced to many years in Alcatraz prison for their involvement in gang activity, including the distribution of illegal alcohol. However, the Weasels soon began planning the group's escape, which involved building a makeshift aircraft from items located around the prison. However, the plan soon descended into bitter arguments and disagreements. Angry that their escape plan never came to be, Finn, Billy and Sal decide to get revenge on Weasel. On the night of December 31st, 1933, Sal, Billy and Finn lured Weasel to the top of Alcatraz prison and attacked him with shanks and other makeshift weapons, resulting in Weasel bleeding to death on the roof of Alcatraz. In response to the murder, Sal, Billy and Finn were sentenced to death via electric chair on the Golden Gate Bridge. On January 19, 1934, the three were executed in electric chairs on the bridge. However, after the execution, the four gangsters were transported back in time to the night of December 31st, 1933, to a satanic occurrence of Alcatraz prison in an alternate universe, crawling with zombies as well as the zombified prison warden known as Stanley Ferguson, aka Brutus, all of which have red eyes and so are being controlled by Satan himself. With Sal, Billy and Finn no longer having any recollection of their previous murder of Weasel, the four set out to build their escape aircraft on the roof to get out of Alcatraz. This is where the game begins on Mob of the Dead. Once the four gang members have built the plane, they take off but soon crash on the Golden Gate Bridge before being killed by zombies, thus being reset back to Alcatraz and trying to build the plane again. This results in the four being stuck in an endless time loop, just as Brock and Gary were in Shangri-La. The four will continue to build the plane, crash on the Golden Gate Bridge, and then die for an infinite number of years with no recollection of the previous cycles. After an unknown number of cycles, as well as an overwhelming sense of deja vu, in addition to the afterlife/purgatory portals, the four realise that, in reality, they are all dead, and no matter how many times they try to escape Alcatraz, they will always fail and be reset back into the prison. After stumbling across several old recordings by Stanley Ferguson documenting the murder of Weasel, Sal, Billy and Finn realise that, in their previous life, they must have killed Weasel and thus set out to kill Weasel once again, blaming him for their eternal fate within Alcatraz prison. This is where we get to decide the outcome of the Mob of the Dead story. If Sal, Billy and Finn again kill Weasel, the cycle continues, with the four gang members once again being reset back to Alcatraz with no recollection of anything before. However, if Weasel kills Sal, Billy and Finn, the time cycle is broken, leaving Weasel free to escape Alcatraz and return to the regular universe to continue on with his life. After activating the polarization device in Shanghai, Misty, Moulton, Russman and Stuhlinger make their way to Central Africa where the final spire is to be found. During their journey, they witness the crumbling remnants of the globe and many of the final human strongholds fall victim to the zombies. Moulton, Misty and Stuhlinger also learn of Russman's past in Broken Arrow, which is a secret government organisation, as an agent before being made redundant and thus also homeless. They eventually arrive at the site of the Rift, a gateway to the ether in the form of a huge hole in the ground next to an old mining operation containing the final polarization tower. After further exploration, the four discover a subsurface cowboy town where they are once again contacted by both Richtofen and Maxis and pestered to complete their demands. This is where the game starts on Buried. After a long hard battle, the four eventually managed to activate the third and final polarization device. With all three spires now active and the gateway to the ether open, it's now deciding points. If you activate the three polarization devices in Maxis' favour, Maxis travels through the portal and into the ether, gaining control of its powers and thus takes control of the zombies, returning their eye colour to yellow. Maxis then uses the forces of the ether to open a gateway to Agartha, where he tries to reunite himself with his daughter Samantha. However, during the process he also announces that he will destroy the Earth and kill the remaining human population, proving himself to be just as bad as Richtofen. Finally, Maxis removes Richtofen from the ether and leaves him on the Earth as a single blue-eyed zombie. On the other hand, if you activate the three polarization towers in Richtofen's favour, Richtofen mends the rift, granting him complete control over the ether's energies, whilst leaving Samantha trapped within Agartha for all eternity. With his master plan now fully complete, Richtofen decides to take physical control of Stuhlinger to relive his past memories of slaying zombies in his new playground called Earth. Finally, Richtofen uses his newly gained powers to remove Maxis from the very existence itself, ultimately sealing Richtofen's victory over his former boss. Either way, whichever German achieves his ultimate victory, Misty, Malton, Stuhling and Russman are all eventually killed by the zombies and buried, leaving the Earth as now nothing more than a zombie-infested wasteland. And that's the end of our CoD zombie storyline. At least in the regular universe. Unbeknownst to both Germans, Samantha had actually travelled back in time to an alternate universe where Group 935 had actually been created much earlier in World War I, long before Hitler or the Nazis had ever come to power. In this alternate universe, Samantha had committed herself to the task of warning people about the impending zombie apocalypse and do everything in her power to prevent it. In this universe, Group 935 had been formed in 1917 by Dr. Maxis and his research partner Richtofen. Their research led Group 935 to an old church and the surrounding area in northern France, where Group 935 set up an outpost in hope that their research could uncover new technology which could ensure Germany's ultimate victory against the Allies in World War I. After learning of possible ancient forces buried beneath the outpost, Group 935 set up an excavation site which was protected from the Allies by German biplanes, Zeppelins and even new 1,000-foot combat robots which were previously created by Group 935. The robots patrolled the site to keep Allied forces out. At first, Group 935's research was going well. They had uncovered descriptions within the central excavation site which described ancient forces that could be harnessed using rods and elemental stones, allegedly also located somewhere beneath, or I should say buried beneath the site. However, Group 935 had not managed to recover either the rods or the stones. Therefore, Dr. Maxis drew up blueprints to create replica rods and stones. Each stone in question corresponded to one of the 4 elements people thought existed at the time. These were fire, ice, or water, wind and lightning. The ancient civilization Group 935 were researching into had supposedly managed to create staffs which could harness these elements to use as weapons. These staffs were what Dr. Maxis and team intended to replicate in order to secure Germany's ultimate victory. Dr. Maxis ordered Richtofen to begin constructing the replica staffs immediately. Meanwhile, Group 935 also continued research into element 115 which they had discovered on site. Experimentation resulted in localized energy fields being created around the 6 element 115 conversion generators on site. Dr. Maxis theorized that the 115 conversion generators actually functioned as portals which brought forth objects through space and time. Maxis also hypothesized that if all 6 conversion generators were active at once, enough energy could be channeled to uncover more secrets within the outpost. This led to Group 935 discovering the pack-punch machine on top of the excavation site. Group 935 soon also had another major breakthrough in the excavation site. After repeated efforts to blast their way deeper into the chamber failed, a soldier brought a gramophone into the chamber to help the other soldiers relax. As the music recorded by a group known as La Source Noire played, the seal into the lower sector of the excavation site opened, revealing a deeper network of catacombs. Dr. Maxis thought that different recordings may reveal more hidden areas around other parts of the base. However, over the following nights, these dark forces made it clear that Group 935 had overstayed their welcome. The presence of 115 caused zombies of the ancient civilization to rise from the excavation site. The zombies killed many of the soldiers and scientists, but were eventually pushed back by the remaining German soldiers who secured the area. Also, during the night, mysterious chalk drawings appeared on walls around the base in the shape of weapons. As well as this, an ancient box appeared which brought forth weapons from many different eras. Dr. Maxis theorized that element 115 was actually disrupting the space-time continuum itself, causing these weapons from other eras being present in 1918. However, shortly after the first mini-outbreak at the base, things rapidly began spiraling out of control. Samantha had decided that, given the events that had just occurred at the site, it was time to start interfering with the events of this universe in order to avert the coming zombie apocalypse and the nuclear destruction of the world. Samantha began talking to Dr. Maxis in his head, claiming to be his daughter, although at this point in time in 1918, Samantha hadn't actually been born yet, causing Dr. Maxis to become highly confused and even doubt his own sanity. Samantha continued to tell Dr. Maxis about how she was trapped within Agatha and needed freeing, adding even further confusion onto Maxis. However, later that day, a second much larger zombie outbreak occurred. This resulted in Maxis himself becoming infected, whilst the remaining 935 scientists and German soldiers were killed. Richtofen, realizing that Maxis would soon turn into a zombie, kills Maxis and then removes Maxis' brain and stores it in a jar in order to preserve his mind and then return him to another body later, ultimately saving Maxis' life. At this point, the site was completely overrun, with the robots themselves falling to automated control after their crews were killed. However, Richtofen wasn't alone. Shortly before the outbreak, the US received reports of advanced German technology being deployed in northern France. Fearing that this could dramatically alter the course of the war against the America's favour, the US sent in an operative, Tank Dempsey, to scout out the area and apprehend Richtofen to be sent back to America for further interrogation. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union sent in Nikolai Belinsky, tasked with a similar mission after receiving similar reports. The Japanese Emperor ordered Takeo Masaki to investigate the Group 935 site in northern France after learning of possible sightings of mythical creatures, in other words, the zombies. Shortly after arrival at the now overrun excavation site, Dempsey, Nikolai and Takeo meet for the first time and, although cautious of one another, decide to band together to fight the undead. The three soon encounter Richtofen, who persuades them to abandon their missions and join him instead, as Richtofen realises just how grave the consequences could be if the outbreak isn't contained. Dempsey, Nikolai and Takeo are soon contacted by Samantha, who pleads with them to help free her from Agatha, which the three agree to do. Richtofen, on the other hand, grew a disliking of Samantha and blamed her for the demise of Dr. Maxis, thus leading him to prioritise saving Maxis over saving Samantha. Richtofen managed to salvage some old materials from the site, creating a quadrotor drone, which would act as a temporary medium for Maxis until Richtofen had a chance to return Maxis' brain to another body. Afterwards, Richtofen reluctantly agreed to help Dempsey, Nikolai and Takeo free Samantha. The four soon found the parts to build the four elemental staffs as they carried out a set of tasks from Samantha, which eventually resulted in the gateway to Agatha opening, uniting Maxis with his future daughter and freeing her from Agatha. After freeing Samantha from Agatha and completing the Easter egg, we get to see a cutscene of Samantha and another child called Eddie playing with their toys, as though the entire zombie storyline is just a child's game. Now this is where we get further into the concept of alternate universes / alternate timelines. In other words, the multiverse theory. Now in Call of Duty Zombies there are actually multiple timelines taking place. The graphic on the screen here might help you understand it. The first timeline is all of the events involving Group 935, Richtofen's master plan and then the whole zombie apocalypse. However, after buried, Samantha travels into the second timeline where, as we saw earlier, Group 935 had been created in World War I instead of the late 1930s as in the first timeline. This is the whole basis surrounding the multiverse theory. It states that there are an infinite number of alternate timelines and in each one, the events that take place are different to those in our main timeline. Samantha knows that because the events in the Origins timeline are slightly different to those in the main timeline, there is the possibility that the zombie apocalypse can be avoided completely if events are altered enough. Therefore, Samantha speaks telepathically to Maxis and our four characters in Origins, eventually resulting in them freeing her from Agatha and altering events so that the zombie apocalypse is now more unlikely to occur in the Origins universe. In the Origins endgame cutscene, we witness a third timeline, where Samantha and Eddie are just innocent children with no power over Element 115 or the zombies. In this third universe, the events of our main timeline are just a child's game, although as we witnessed during the cutscene, this universe clearly has its own zombie-related problems, as towards the end, we hear sirens sounding and Dr. Max is calling for the children to come down into the basement. After Eddie states that he wished all of the heroes in their game were real, Samantha says, "My dad has a plan." This is a plan that would see our four characters from Origins take dangerous and uncertain steps in order to prevent the zombie apocalypse from ever happening. However, little did they know that a far greater evil was beginning to appear on the horizon.